my name is Bianca, and today we're going to review some important medical terminology, including regional terms, directional terms, and body planes. But before that, we should go over the relationship between anatomy and physiology. While anatomy is the study of the body's structures, physiology is the study behind how those structures come together to function to keep a body alive. However, it is important to note that the body is maintained by several levels of structural organization. From simplest to complex, the order would be atoms, molecules, cells, which make up tissues, and a group of tissues makes up organs. A group of organs makes up an organ system, and then those organ systems make up the body. Without one of these structures, it would be impossible for the body to function, so they all work together to keep us alive. So here to help me out is my mother, and she's going to be my model today. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to be talking about are the body planes, and these planes are four imaginary flat surfaces that pass through the body in the anatomical position. So the anatomical position, your body is going to be facing forward with your arms at your sides, your palms are going to be facing forward, and your feet are going to be shoulder width apart. So with this position, the planes are going to pass through your body. So the first plane we're going to be talking about is the sagittal plane, or can be also called the median plane. And the sagittal plane divides the body into left and right parts. So if we were to take a ribbon and place it exactly like this, the body is going to be divided into left and right parts. So that's the first plane. The second plane is the parasagittal plane. So this plane is parallel to the sagittal plane, and it also divides the body into left and right parts, but unequally. So here we have our sagittal plane. If we move it over just a little bit, this is going to be called the parasagittal plane. So it still divides the body into left and right parts, but just not equally like the sagittal plane does. The next plane is the coronal plane, or the frontal plane, and this plane splits everything into front and back. So turn. So if you were to put an imaginary line right here, it divides the body into the front and to the back. So this is the coronal or the frontal plane. You can move back. And finally, the last plane is the transverse plane, or the horizontal plane. And this plane divides the body into top and to bottom. So if you were to put a ribbon right here, like this, you divide the body into the top and to the bottom. Top, bottom. So those are the planes. The next thing we're going to be talking about are the directional terms. So the first one that you should know is anterior or ventral. So anterior describes everything towards the front of the body. So the front of the body. And contrary to this, you have the posterior or the dorsal. So this describes everything towards the back or the back of the body. So next, you have your superior and your inferior. So superior, or could be called cranial, is structures towards the top of the head, or basically like on top. So anything superior, and then opposite to that is inferior. So structures that are lower down. So for example, you could say the legs are inferior to the trunk of the body, for example. So next we have medial. So medial is towards the midline, so the middle of the body. So that's medial. So those are structures that are towards the middle. And contrary to that, you also have lateral. So if you stick your arms out, since this is the midline, the furthest thing from the midline would be your hands, because it's furthest away from the midline. And lastly, you have proximal and distal. So proximal describes something towards the trunk of the body. So this way, going up would be proximal. But however, if you're going to go down, that would be distal. And the way I remember that is distal, you kind of give it some distance. So a great distance from the trunk of the body. So we're going to switch things up a bit. So I actually created a song with all the regional terms in it. So hopefully it'll help you remember more. This is a song for the regional terms, so hopefully this helps you remember. Digits and tarsus, crus, patella, digits in the knee, palma, pollis and carpus, antebrachium, yours is the antecubitus, brachium, maxilla, mentis, drus, feces in the new nephrons, cranium, Cerebellum, oculus, bucca, iris, thesis, and cervices. You also have the thorax, mama, and also the abdomen, umbilicus, head, pelvis, pubis, femur, and finally pes. So we on to the posterior view. Plants like calcaneus, ceropopliteus, femur, and also gluteus, antebrachium, sacrum, luis, don't forget olecranon. Brachium, dorsum, shoulder, cephalon, you also have cervices. Don't forget the two limbs, upper and lower, and that is the end of our video. So I hoped all of you enjoyed that video. I know I am not a very good singer, but hopefully got the message across. So now we're going to transition into something different. So now we're going to transition in some major body cavities. So should be fun. So what we are going to do now is we are going to identify the body cavities. So it is important to note that the ones highlighted in yellow are the major body cavities, while the ones in red are just regular body cavities. So here we have our list. So let's get to it. So the first one we have to identify is the dorsal body cavity, which would be right here, and this is one of the major body cavities. So whenever I think of dorsal, I think of a dorsal fin, which is on the back, so maybe that can help you remember a little better. The next one is the ventral body cavity, which can be found right here, and this consists of the thoracic cavity, the abdominal cavity, and the pelvic cavity, which we will go on to later. The next one is a cranial cavity, which can be found right here, but if you want a better shot, see where the number 2 is right there, that is also the cranial cavity. The next one we should look at is the vertebral cavity, which can be found right here below the cranial cavity. You'll see right there. If you want a better look at it, you can go to this one right here, and the spine right here, that would be considered the vertebral cavity. The next one we're looking at is the thoracic cavity, which can be found right here. Next is the abdominal cavity, which can be found right here, or technically right here, because that is usually where the abdomen is, so that's how I remember it. Yeah, almost there. Next we have the pelvic cavity, which can be found either here or here, whichever one you want, but yeah. And then we have the abdominal pelvic cavity, which if you scroll, can be found right here. So this is the abdominal cavity, and then this is the pelvic cavity. So you may be wondering why I left these blank. That's just because they're not part of the major body cavities, but if you do want to know, then this one right here would be the superior mediastinum. Lungs right here would be the pleural cavity. The heart would be the pericardial cavity within the mediastinum, and this line right here would lead to the diaphragm. So in the end, this is the final diagram. So what we're going to do now is we're going to list the organs included in each of the major cavities that we just went over a couple seconds ago. So I made some note cards and drew out each body cavity, and we listed the organs down below. So for the abdominal cavity, that's right here. Some organs that are included are the gallbladder, liver, pancreas, and the stomach. For the vertebral cavity, there aren't any organs, but it does include the spine right here. For the cranial cavity, the only organ really present here is the brain. For the thoracic cavity, the 2 major organs present here are the heart and the lungs. For the pelvic cavity, the 3 major organs would be the uterus, ovary, and bladder. So basically, the whole reproductive system lies in the pelvic cavity. So you may have noticed that we missed out on the dorsal cavity and the ventral cavity. But the reason why I skipped over those was because within those major body cavities are the smaller ones that we just went over, such as the dorsal body cavity includes the vertebral and the cranial, so we would just be repeating ourselves. And the ventral body cavity includes the thoracic, the abdominal, and the pelvic cavities. So we would just be repeating ourselves, but yeah. After learning these medical terms, you may be asking, so what's the point? Why do I need to know this? Well, for starters, these terms go beyond the world of anatomy and physiology. They also relate to biology and chemistry. Biology is the study of life, but you cannot be alive without your anatomical structures. For chemistry, you learn how your cells produce energy and proteins. If you understand anatomy and physiology, then you will be able to understand why your organs function the way they do and how the systems work together. However, we can also use this information beyond the classroom. Forensic scientists use these descriptions when performing an autopsy of a corpse to determine the cause of death. Even some doctors know this terminology. I recently had 2 surgeries, and my doctor would explain how the procedure would go, and in some instances, he used some medical terminology that we covered in this exact video. Now knowing these terms, I can fully understand the step-by-step process of my procedure and how my body is affected. After a lot of review in the end, I understand many regional terms of the body and how to use directional terms to identify a position of a limb. I also understand the body planes a lot better, and I hope that you do too. What is still a little iffy for me are the organs within each cavity because the placement is kind of weird, but besides that, I have a strong understanding of these medical terms. For me to learn more, I learn best when moving around, touching things, and creating hand motions that go along with these movements, and even in some cases learning songs because it helps me remember more. However, since I cannot physically touch my organs, I can also learn with visual graphs when it is labeled clearly. So far, I've been able to understand a lot more about how the body works, and I think my video will help you all understand the body a lot more too. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you learned many new things today. Okay, bye!